The ceasefire was signed. The world moved on. But Israel did not. While cameras shifted away, while diplomats celebrated, while everyone assumed the Lebanon chapter was closed, Israeli forces were still on Lebanese soil, still moving, still pushing deeper. And here is what nobody is saying out loud. This is not a temporary buffer. This is not a precaution. What Israel is doing right now in southern Lebanon has a name, and that name is territorial control. The question is not just why Israel entered Lebanon. The question is, why is Israel refusing to leave? Let us be very clear about what is at stake here. Southern Lebanon is not just a patch of land. It is the border region that separates Israel from Hezbollah's heartland. It is the zone from which thousands of rockets were fired into northern Israel in 2024. It is the area where Hezbollah built tunnels, stored weapons, and embedded fighters inside villages for over a decade. Israel says it needs a security buffer, but a security buffer does not require permanent bases. A security buffer does not require the displacement of over 100,000 Lebanese civilians. A security buffer does not require redrawn maps. What Israel is doing right now, holding approximately 10% of Lebanese territory even after the ceasefire, looks less like a buffer and more like an annexation in slow motion. And if this continues, the consequences will not stay inside Lebanon. The consequences will reshape the entire Middle East. Here's the ground reality as of today. In November 2024, Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a ceasefire brokered by the United States and France. The agreement was clear. Israeli forces would withdraw from Lebanese territory within 60 days. Lebanese army units would deploy south. Hezbollah would pull back beyond the Litani River. That deadline passed. Then another deadline passed. Then another. Israeli forces are still positioned in at least 5 key zones inside southern Lebanon. These include the strategic hilltops near Qiyam, the border town of Mais el-Jabal, and several villages in the Marjayoun district. Israel's official position: the Lebanese army is not deployed fast enough. Hezbollah has not withdrawn completely. The security conditions are not yet met. Lebanon's position: Israel is violating international law and the ceasefire agreement every single day. Hezbollah's position: publicly restrained, but its fighters have not disarmed. They have simply repositioned. The United States' position: publicly calling on Israel to withdraw, privately not applying serious pressure. And on the ground, Lebanese civilians who fled their villages during the war are still blocked from returning. Their homes sit inside zones that Israeli military controls. The Lebanese flag is not flying there. Israeli military vehicles are. This is the situation. It is tense, it is unresolved, and it is getting more dangerous by the week. Then came the moment that changed everything. In early 2025, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a statement that broke the official silence. He said, and these words are critical, that Israel would maintain a presence in certain Lebanese areas for as long as necessary to protect Israeli citizens. Not a temporary presence, not until conditions improve, for as long as necessary. That phrase was a signal to the Israeli public that this is not a short-term operation, a signal to the Lebanese government that Israeli withdrawal is not guaranteed, a signal to Hezbollah that the post-war map has changed, and a signal to the world that Israel has no fixed withdrawal timeline. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz followed this with an even more direct statement. Israel would hold Lebanese territory as long as threats persist. He compared the situation to the Golan Heights, the Syrian territory Israel captured in 1967 and formally annexed in 1981. The Golan Heights comparison, that is the escalation moment. That is the line that was crossed, because the Golan Heights were once also described as a temporary security measure. To understand what Israel is doing, you need to go back, not decades, but to the specific logic that has driven Israeli strategy in Lebanon for over 40 years. Israel first invaded Lebanon in 1978. The stated reason was to push the Palestine Liberation Organization away from the border. Israel established a 10-kilometer security zone. Sound familiar? Then, in 1982, Israel invaded again, this time all the way to Beirut. The stated reason was to eliminate PLO infrastructure and protect northern Israel. The actual result was an 18-year occupation of southern Lebanon, the creation of a proxy force called the South Lebanon Army, and the birth of Hezbollah itself, which grew directly out of Lebanese Shia resistance to Israeli occupation. Israel finally withdrew from Lebanon in May 2000. The withdrawal was sudden, some would say chaotic. Hezbollah claimed it as a historic victory. That narrative became Hezbollah's greatest recruitment tool for the next 2 decades. Then came 2006. Israel and Hezbollah fought a 34-day war. Israel failed to destroy Hezbollah. A UN ceasefire resolution called UN Security Council Resolution 1701 was passed, requiring Hezbollah to disarm south of the Litani River and requiring Israeli withdrawal. Neither side fully complied. For 18 years after 2006, Hezbollah rebuilt. It went from having a few thousand rockets to over 130,000, the largest non-state arsenal in history. It embedded that arsenal inside homes, mosques, schools, and hospitals across southern Lebanon. It built cross-border tunnels. It trained tens of thousands of fighters. Then came October 7th, 2023. Hamas attacked Israel from Gaza. Hezbollah opened a second front from Lebanon, firing rockets into northern Israel in what it called a show of solidarity. For over a year, northern Israeli towns like Kiryat Shmona and Nahariya were under daily fire. Over 80,000 Israelis were evacuated from the north. Israel launched its major military campaign against Lebanon in September 2024. Within weeks, it eliminated most of Hezbollah's senior leadership, including Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike. It destroyed much of Hezbollah's weapons infrastructure. It struck deep into the Bekaa Valley. By November 2024, Hezbollah was weakened enough to accept a ceasefire. But here's the thing Israel learned from 2000. When you leave, the enemy rebuilds. And Israel does not want to repeat that lesson. Every previous Israeli operation in Lebanon ended the same way. Israel entered, Israel fought, Israel withdrew, Hezbollah survived, Hezbollah rebuilt. The cycle repeated. This time, Israel is signaling it wants to break that cycle. Here is what is different about 2024 and 2025 compared to every previous chapter. First, the military outcome was more decisive than any previous conflict. Hezbollah lost its top leadership. It lost its precision missile program. It lost its command and control infrastructure. For the first time in decades, Hezbollah is genuinely weakened, not just tactically, but strategically. Second, Israel has domestic political pressure to never allow northern communities to be evacuated again. The image of 80,000 Israelis forced from their homes was a national trauma. Israeli politicians, especially Netanyahu, cannot afford to return northern residents to homes that face the same threat. Third, the regional context has shifted. Iran is under unprecedented economic pressure. Syria, which Hezbollah used as a supply corridor, collapsed in late 2024 when the Assad regime fell. Hezbollah's main resupply route, through Syrian territory, is now disrupted. Fourth, the United States, despite its public statements, has not used real leverage to force Israeli withdrawal. The Biden administration tried. The Trump administration, returning to power in January 2025, has even less interest in pressuring Israel. Fifth, and perhaps most significantly, this is the first time an Israeli government has openly compared Lebanese territory to the Golan Heights. Previous governments always maintained the fiction of temporary presence. This government is not maintaining that fiction. All of these factors together mean that the Lebanese situation is not following the previous script. The 10% of Lebanese territory Israel currently holds may not return to Lebanon on any fixed timeline, if it returns at all. Let us break down what this occupation means at every level. At the local level, the human cost is already severe. Over 100,000 Lebanese civilians remain displaced from their homes in the south. Villages like Kfar Kila, Markaba, and Ramaish, communities with histories going back centuries, are either empty or under Israeli military control. The Lebanese economy, already devastated by years of financial collapse, cannot absorb this additional blow. The south of Lebanon was always the poorest, most neglected region. It is now also the most occupied. At the Lebanese national level, the state is in a deep crisis of legitimacy. The Lebanese government signed a ceasefire agreement that Israel is not honoring. The Lebanese army has been deploying south, but it cannot confront Israeli forces. The Lebanese political system, already paralyzed by sectarian divisions and Hezbollah's political dominance, has no mechanism to force Israeli withdrawal. Lebanon is sovereign on paper. On the ground in the south, it is not. At the regional level, every Arab state is watching what happens next. If Israel successfully holds 10% of Lebanon without serious consequences, it sets a precedent. It tells every regional actor that ceasefire agreements with Israel can be unilaterally extended or ignored. It tells Hezbollah and its backer, Iran, that even in a weakened state, the pressure continues. It tells Syria's new government that Israeli military activity on its borders is the new normal. And it tells Jordan and Egypt that their peace agreements with Israel do not insulate them from watching this dynamic unfold. At the global level, the United Nations has issued formal complaints. France, a key broker of the ceasefire, has expressed frustration. But there are no real enforcement mechanisms. The UN interim force in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, has been in southern Lebanon since 1978. It has a mandate but no ability to compel Israeli withdrawal. Russia and China have raised objections in the Security Council, but the United States has blocked any binding resolution. The international system, in other words, has no effective tool to address this situation, which is precisely why Israel is continuing. Here is the real power map, not the official one, the real one. Officially, the Lebanese government is sovereign over all of Lebanon. Officially, UNIFIL enforces the ceasefire. Officially, the United States is committed to Lebanese sovereignty. Officially, Israel has agreed to withdraw. Reality is different. On the ground in southern Lebanon, Israel holds military control. The Israeli army decides which roads are open. The Israeli army decides whether civilians can return. The Israeli army controls the hilltops, the checkpoints, and the strategic positions. Hezbollah still exists. It is weakened, but it is not destroyed. Its political wing still operates. Its fighters are still present, repositioned north of areas under Israeli observation. Its weapons have been partially restocked. The new Syrian government has complicated the resupply routes, but not eliminated all of them. Hezbollah is watching. It is rebuilding quietly. It is waiting for the political and military balance to shift. The Lebanese army is caught in the middle. It is finally deploying to the south in larger numbers than it has in decades. But it is underfunded, undertrained for this specific mission, and constitutionally incapable of confronting either Hezbollah or Israel. It is performing a delicate act, visible enough to satisfy international observers, careful enough not to trigger a conflict it cannot win. Iran, Hezbollah's primary backer, has suffered significant setbacks. The killing of Nasrallah, the disruption of supply lines, the weakening of the broader axis of resistance, all of these have put Tehran on the defensive. But Iran has not abandoned Lebanon. It is recalibrating. The United States holds the most critical leverage. It provides Israel with the weapons, the diplomatic cover, and the economic support that enable Israeli operations. But the Trump administration's approach to Israel in 2025 is to give maximum support with minimum conditions. That means Israel faces no serious external pressure to withdraw. The power dynamics, then, are deeply asymmetric. Israel holds the cards in the south. Lebanon cannot challenge it. Hezbollah is weakened. The international community is paralyzed, and the United States is not applying pressure. Where does this go? There are three realistic scenarios. In this scenario, sustained diplomatic pressure, primarily from France, Saudi Arabia, and possibly the United States, results in a phased Israeli withdrawal. In exchange, Israel receives written guarantees about Lebanese army deployment, UNIFIL monitoring, and internationally verified Hezbollah disarmament benchmarks. Israeli forces pull back to the border. Lebanese civilians return to their villages. The ceasefire agreement is finally honored. This is the best-case scenario. It is also the least likely. It requires the United States to apply real pressure on Israel. It requires Hezbollah to accept verifiable disarmament in the south. It requires the Lebanese state to function. And right now, the Lebanese state barely functions. All three conditions would need to be met simultaneously. That is a lot to ask. In this scenario, the situation simply stays as it is for months, possibly years. Israel maintains its positions. The Lebanese army deploys to areas Israel allows. Hezbollah stays quiet because it is too weak to restart fighting. Diplomats keep talking without results. Northern Lebanese civilians remain displaced. The international community periodically expresses concern but takes no effective action. This is the most likely outcome in the near term. Frozen conflicts are comfortable for the stronger party, which is Israel. It costs Israel relatively little to maintain these positions. It costs Lebanon enormously. Time in a frozen conflict works in favor of the occupier. The danger of scenario 2 is that it gradually normalizes Israeli control. Once normalized, withdrawal becomes politically harder for any Israeli government to justify. The occupation becomes permanent, not through a formal decision, but through the slow erosion of any expectation of change. In this scenario, patience runs out. Hezbollah, perhaps after partial rebuilding, perhaps under pressure from Iran, launches rocket attacks or a cross-border operation. Israel responds with a major military campaign. The 2024 war restarts, potentially with greater intensity because both sides have learned from the previous round. This scenario carries the highest danger of regional spillover. If Iran calculates that Hezbollah is about to be permanently dismantled, it may directly intervene. If Israeli strikes hit Lebanese civilian infrastructure on a larger scale, Arab states face domestic pressure to respond. If Hezbollah fires into Israeli cities, Israeli escalation may extend into Bekaa Valley and Beirut. The worst-case version of Scenario 3 is a full regional war involving Iran, potentially drawing in other actors. This remains unlikely in the immediate term, but it becomes more likely the longer the frozen conflict in Scenario 2 drags on without resolution. Here is the bottom line. What Israel is doing in southern Lebanon is not unprecedented in the history of this region, but it is unprecedented in the post-Cold War, post-Oslo, 21st century version of this conflict. Israel is, for the first time, openly signaling that it may treat Lebanese territory the way it has treated Syrian territory on the Golan Heights. Occupied, held, and eventually normalized. The mechanisms that were supposed to prevent this, ceasefire agreements, UN resolutions, international pressure, are not working. They were not designed for a situation where the strongest military power in the region has concluded that withdrawal means vulnerability. And here is what makes this so dangerous for the broader Middle East. If Israel successfully holds 10% of Lebanon without meaningful consequences, it does not just change the map of Lebanon. It changes what other actors believe is possible. It tells every government in the region, and beyond, that international law is negotiable. that ceasefire agreements are starting points, not endpoints, that the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Lebanon is already one of the most fragile states on earth, a country that has survived civil war, financial collapse, a port explosion that destroyed its capital, and multiple Israeli military campaigns. Lebanon has survived it all. But Lebanon's survival has always come at enormous cost to its people. The Lebanese people in the south did not start this war. They did not choose to live next to Hezbollah. They did not choose to become a battlefield for Iranian-Israeli proxy conflict. They did not choose displacement, destruction, and now occupation. Whatever the political and military calculations of governments and armed groups, the people of southern Lebanon are living in the consequence. They cannot return home. They cannot rebuild. They cannot know when or whether normal life will return. That is the human reality underneath the geopolitics. Israel has legitimate security concerns. That is real. The trauma of 80,000 Israelis evacuated from their homes is real. The threat Hezbollah poses is real. None of that is in question. But occupation is not a security solution. History, including Israel's own history in Lebanon, has proven that. The 18-year occupation from 1982 to 2000 did not eliminate Hezbollah. It created Hezbollah. The question hanging over southern Lebanon right now is simple. Is Israel making a different calculation this time? Does it believe that permanent territorial control will achieve what temporary occupation never could? And if the answer is yes, then the conflict that everyone thought was paused is not paused at all. It has simply entered a new and more dangerous phase. The world should be paying attention, because what happens in that 10% of Lebanese territory will determine the shape of the Middle East for the next decade.